speak. I think my last video was a Gemini full moon, correct? I remember talking about Mars in Gemini and like the chaos that would ensue with that. That's been like such an interesting transit. I feel like as soon as it's stationed direct, everybody stopped talking about it, but it is still very much there, and I feel like people were actually more combative as soon as it turned direct, but I feel like that's definitely calmed down as we're like having everything move into Aquarius and Pisces. But today we're going to be talking about the Pisces new moon. I want to make an entire video dedicated to this Saturn and Pluto transit, and I am gonna finish do a extension of my predictions videos because boy do I have a lot to say about them. But I do think it's important to note that this new moon in Pisces is going to be the last time that we're going to be having Pisces transits before Saturn enters it for the next 2.5 years basically. So it's kind of that last little indulgent moment of blissful water element, intuitive, empathetic, creative, dreamy, beautiful, ethereal, encapsulating, intoxicating Pisces vibe before we face the consequences that come with it. Just kidding, sort of, not really, but this new moon's great. It's a vibe. It's nice. I don't think it's too delusional. I tend to use that word a lot with Pisces, and I know there's like a lot of hate around that because I don't limit Pisces to just being delusional, but it's just the right word to use. It's just the right word to explain the delusion that I'm trying to verbalize when I'm trying to, explain more so the Neptunian aspects of Pisces. But it's not this sort of head in the clouds vibe that we typically have with Pisces moon transits, because it's going to be conjunct Saturn again for the last time as it inches out of its final degrees of Aquarius. And I think that's going to give us a good level of grounding and being realistic, having discipline backing, maybe some dreamier feelings or more creative ideas or intuitive romance or anything that we're experiencing. It's kind of like we're enjoying the maybe slight high of Pisces, but we still have our feet on the ground. We're not, completely being taken into this other realm that is completely negating reality. With that being said, I'm going to do the 12 signs and, where you can expect a new beginning, things like that with the Pisces new moon. It's really only conjunct Saturn. There's no other major aspects to it. It's nice and sweet and simple, honestly. I feel like for me, it's in my 5th house. I'm a Scorpio rising. It's probably going to be something creative. I really don't think it's going to be something romantic based off of my current circumstances. I don't think that it will be romantic. Trust me, I wish. With all these 5th house transits, I'm like, bring me a new lover. But I don't mean that actually, because my world would turn upside down. Not about me, anyway. I feel like it's something that's probably going to be a little bit more mundane for me. It's also just not in an angular house, so it's not anything that I think is going to, flip my world upside down. However, this is going to bring some more attention to the mutable signs, okay? So this is a good time for Gemini, Virgo, Pisces, and Sagittarius, sorry I said that out of order, to get their little moment to shine with this new moon. And then alongside that, we're actually going to have Venus, I believe at 29 degrees of Pisces, making its ingress into Aries. So again, I kind of like that there's not a million planets in Pisces right now. I like that we're going to be having some grounding with Aquarius, Saturn in Aquarius, and that conjunction to Saturn, but then also having that Venus ingress into the fire energy is going to bring us more passion. And I just feel like, was it last year there was a Pisces stellium or something that happened? I remember literally not being in the physical realm when it was happening. I don't even feel like I really remember it. I genuinely feel like my head was in the clouds, given I was in some really complicated circumstances. I definitely probably blacked out of emotional turmoil. But the Pisces stellium or whatever the hell we had going on literally this time last year was so watery to the point where it literally might as well have been in like a wave pool. Like there was no ability to ground yourself or grasp at something solid. And that's not to say that like the water as an element is like problematic or something. I definitely think it was good for people that need water in their life, in the sense that they finally got to kind of like go with the flow and chill and let the, you know, metaphorical element of water tread them to shore wherever they needed to end up, or kind of get to like dive in the depths of the water. But I personally didn't need extra water in my life at the time. I'm also a Cancer sun and a Scorpio rising, Pisces South Node. And despite the fact that it was like a lot of things in my fifth house, which should have been super fun and indulgent and romantic and creative, it was very like, I literally have no memory of that happening. And I'm just glad that we have Saturn and then we have Venus moving into Aries, because I love me some fire energy and I love me some discipline and some structure. But that's just my Virgo moon coming out. I think, like I said at the beginning of this, that it's important to note that this is the last time Saturn will be in Aquarius, right before it makes its way into Pisces. Every other Pisces new full moon, Venus, Mercury transiting for the next 2.5 years, it will have to cross the bodyguard that will be Saturn at the time. So I really do feel like this is kind of like the final let me choose my words carefully, because with it being a new moon, obviously it's like doors are opening, new beginnings, you know, being able to start a new chapter. I feel like with water signs, because of the depth that comes with them, even a new moon in a water sign can sometimes like be 10 layers deeper than what was intended with that like cycle opening a new door. And I think when the moon is in a water sign in general, it's typically heavier than, you know, it being in any other element. And I think even something like, oh, new moon in Pisces, which you're probably going to hear from a bunch of other astrologers being something that's like out of this world, you know, you're going to feel completely blinded by love and creativity. It's like we can't ignore the fact that Pisces and Neptunian energy also rules like, yes, feeling amazing, that higher octave of pleasure, but in a way that's like totally unhealthy and not good for us, and like is not worth indulging in. So the example that I always try to give people when I'm explaining Pisces and Neptune to them, two examples. Pisces rules the ocean. So if we think of like, you know, going to the beach on a sunny day, we're losing track of time, we're enjoying ourselves, we have nothing to do that day but just enjoy ourselves at the beach, right? It's sunset, we're taking pictures. The pictures don't even come out that good because you can't even capture the beauty because it's so insane when you're looking at the sunset. Yeah, that same ocean that's so beautiful is the same ocean that fucking murders people, that swallows things alive, that we'd have uncharted territory. We don't even know what the ocean is, what it does, how scary it is. There are tsunamis on a stormy, cloudy day. That pretty sunset, when it's not there, that same exact ocean is going to be the shit to eat you up and spit you out. And that is the depth of Pisces, and the even mutable energy of Pisces, in the sense that what you get in that given moment is the truth and is the reality of that Piscean energy. And I think with the water element in general, if we think of like pouring water into like different sized cups, different shaped containers, it's always going to fill the volume of the container it's poured in. Like it's not this solid object that, you know, keeps its form. It's very malleable, and if you pour it into any shape of a container, it's going to fill the volume and the shape of that container. And I feel like that flexibility and that changeability and that malleability of Pisces, which is just the fact that it's a mutable sign as well as water, that shape-shifting idea can sometimes become problematic when we now take that same understanding of that concept and apply it to our emotional world or our intuitive world. For example, I always tell people when they have a lot of Pisces placements, I'm like, yes, you might be delusional, but it's great if you know how to use it to your advantage rather than weaponizing it against yourself. Because with Pisces, basically replacing what they know to be the truth or reality with their current feeling in that moment, which I can't even say is right or wrong, because what is reality to begin with? That's a conversation for another day. But whatever Pisces is feeling in that moment becomes the truth of that moment. And what I mean by that is, like, if they have their love goggles on and they're like overwhelmed with how in love with someone they are, you cannot change their mind. Yes, they're mutable in the sense that while given new information, they can change their perspective. But they're also that water element of emotions, and if they're functioning and operating from a place of feeling and listening to their body and their heart, you can't put that person that they're deeply in love with or that thing that they're currently obsessed with in front of them and tell them all the reasons why it's bad. It's not going to do anything. And it's not until their feelings change that the truth will change. And I noticed this with all mutable signs, honestly, and I see this with my Virgo moon too, Gemini, Sagittarius, Pisces. Like, when given new information, they're able to alter their perspective, but regardless of their elements, it's like once they learn a new thing that they determine to be true, it is now the truth that they hold everybody to until they redefine that truth. So for example, let's say, I don't know, what's a good example for this? What's something like practical and realistic? I don't know, let's just, no, that's such a silly example. I was going to say something about the DMV. I don't know why that was the first thing that came into my mind. But let's say, for example, like a Gemini is window shopping or something, right? Geminis love to be stimulated. They love new ideas, feeling inspired, having a million things to look at and talk about. They're window shopping, and they always have a good experience doing this. And they get their little knickknacks, they buy their little things here and there. And then one day, for the first time ever, let's say they see a vendor on the side of the street. They've always had a good experience shopping in this area. But one day, this vendor is trying to, like, haggle them and keep them at a price that they're not willing to pay, and this vendor is just like rude to the Gemini, and that's it, right? From that moment forward, the Gemini will say that this vendor, this shopping area, yeah, it's not good. These people are scammers. Yeah, those people are rude. Vendor people are rude. And that is now the truth until they have an experience that changes their mind in a new way again. And I think that's why people say like Geminis are two-faced or, you know, whatever. That's a silly misconception about Gemini. They, in the same way that Pisces makes their reality or their emotions, their current emotions, their reality, Gemini makes their current understanding of something their reality until they're able to like add more information into their arsenal and reform a new conclusion and share that with the world. You'll see that with fire signs too, like when they get like passionate about something, even let's say like a philosophy or a belief system, like they will have all of their faith into like crystals one day, and then they're gonna read an article one day or listen to somebody that they look up to say that crystals hold like no meaning, they're meaningless, it's a scam from capitalism and they don't do anything, we were all lied to. That Sagittarius is going to tell every damn person that they know that has crystals how dumb they are and how that shit doesn't even work and that they need to have real faith in something solid. Like, do you see the pattern here with mutable signs? I can go off about Virgo too because I'm a Virgo moon and I know that I do that with certain things. And I think with Pisces, like replacing their reality with their emotions, it's like, again, that idea of filling that container. What they feel in that moment is now the truth until they determine and feel otherwise. What was the other example I wanted to use? Oh, the now Neptune sort of aspect of Pisces. Neptune is like one of those planets that I constantly see completely like misinterpreted online, or I shouldn't say misinterpreted because it's an interpretation, but like people forget how fucking dangerous Neptune is, and I don't understand like, it's so ironic because Neptune's literally hidden information and like illusions, and I swear to God, Neptune has scammed the collective into like forgetting how problematic it can be, and has pulled the wool over their eyes into thinking, oh, Neptune's just this little creative planet. Like, no, it is so dangerous. I would like honestly borderline consider it a malefic in my own philosophy, because I feel like, I don't know, I have a lot of harsh aspects to Neptune, and it has screwed my life up. So maybe that's me just being biased. Maybe that's my beautiful moon determining that Neptune is bad, point blank period, until I see it do something good for me. But no, I'm just kidding. But Neptune literally like rules some of the worst things in the fucking world, and we can't ignore that when we're talking about Pisces and Neptune energy. So the example that I always try to use to explain to people is that Neptune is the higher octave of pleasure compared to Venus. Venus, first of all, sometimes like I think gets too much credit for being like ethereal and beautiful and this deep, intense, like romantic love that I think does come from Neptune more than it does Venus. Obviously Venus is exalted in Pisces, but I think that so there's a connection there. But Venus makes me think of just like a slob, or someone who is just very like boastful, not in the way that Jupiter is or Sagittarius is, where it's like overdoing it or being extra, but rather that like they're just there for the good time. They're just there for the pleasure. Venus is just there to like enjoy the goodies and take a little goodie bag home and not call you back. And I think Venus sometimes gets this like, deep, intense, intoxicating sort of reputation, when to me at least a lot of the time it's just like your taste in things, the financial side, the indulgence of like your favorite food, your favorite color, the things that bring you joy, things that make you feel warm and fuzzy. Whereas Neptune is that like entrancing, otherworldly, ethereal pleasure or joy. So my current interpretation of it, based off of my own observations, is that Venus is like a crush that you have. It is your favorite food. It is finding a $20 bill on the ground. It is that baseline of, this is good, this feels good, I had a good day today. Whereas Neptune would be not your crush, but your very toxic ex that is awful for you, but you get high off of interacting with them. It is not your favorite food, it's your favorite drug or alcohol of choice. It's picking your poison. And it's not finding $20 on the ground. It is somebody telling you that they see something in you and they can make you a star overnight, or accidentally having access to someone's very wealthy bank account, or in getting involved in like a get rich quick scam. Okay, do you see the connection here? To me, Venus is like not necessarily wholesome, but just like practical pleasure, whereas Neptune is the dangers and consequences of leaning into that needy, escapist, intoxicating sweet spot, where we know it's something where when we slightly open Pandora's box, we are going to be like Alice in Wonderland, fall down that hole and not be able to pick ourselves out. And even with knowing that about ourselves, doing it anyways because it feels that good. With that being said, I'm going to make an entire separate video for my predictions for Saturn moving into Pisces. I already made a predictions video where I was like loosely kind of talking about the next few years, and that was included in there. But if you do want to see them in advance, I have them on Patreon. I think I started writing about them on Patreon in November, so there's like quite a few things to look at. I do want to make an extended video for that in particular because I think it's going to be a lot, but I think with that conversation of Pisces and Neptune that we just had, this is going to be the last new moon to kind of play around and dance in that delusion before we have to face the Saturnian sort of, what's the right word to use? Maybe boundaries that will be forced upon us if we don't force them ourselves, or if we don't implicate them ourselves. Because now with this, all of this Pisces talk, with Saturn moving into it, anytime Saturn's transiting through a sign, it's going to kind of drag the themes of that sign to hell and back in a very productive way, and kind of throw a lot of wrenches in the mix in order to force us to overcome those obstacles and better understand Piscean energy for what it's worth and its highest value, rather than dancing around in it as if there is no bad side to it. And that's with any sign, but having that in Pisces now, Pisces usually ruling the things that we kind of use as like vices or escapism, or the band-aid that we slap on the way that we deal with our issues, it's going to really force us to buckle down and face that head on. So my biggest recommendation currently right now would be that if you know that you have something that you use as a crutch to deal with your problems, it's better to, what's the saying? The first step to it is admitting it. The first step is admitting it, accepting it. I think that is the greatest advice ever. That's the first step, but also that having the enthusiasm to work on these things will benefit you far more than having to learn them the hard way and just hope that you get off with like a slap on the wrist from Saturn, because we know in reality by the time that it's at that final degree, which you have some time, 2026, you don't want to learn the hard way, because when that comes to Pisces, that's like addiction, rehab, near-death experiences, drowning, literally and metaphorically. Like, that's heavy, and I don't want that for any of you. So if you know you've been playing in the toxicity pool for too long in any way, shape, or form, and you're like, well, I've never had that bad of a consequence, buckle up, sister, because this is when you're gonna have to, confront that in order to have your best personal fulfillment, but also your personal development. Pisces, when it comes to this idea of leaning on it as a form of escapism, I think is something that has already been earlier introduced to us in January of 2022. Once the South Node moved into Scorpio, another water sign, that was certainly like kicking up the concept of having to let go of the things that we cling to in order to convince ourselves that we are in control of things that we don't have control of, such as like manipulation, power and control dynamics in finances and emotions, in the way that we approach problems in our life. Same idea of vices. And with the South Node being in Scorpio at the same time as Saturn moving into Pisces, another water sign, we're having to kind of dismantle those water element themes in our life that are causing our problems, or at least enabling them. And I think too, this is my own observation, I try, it's really interesting because despite being really into like the spiritual world and leaning into this like, very intuitive side of myself, I think politically, obviously people that are like really into astrology and spirituality tend to be very left-leaning or just very liberal, but there's also a side of me that I think has, from the conclusion of the transits and just my own chart, forced me to confront this spiritual, go with the flow, self-love, self-care side of myself, and realize that a lot of it is actually very problematic and self-destructive under the guise of, self-love, or forgiving yourself, or being gentle with yourself. And all of it just boils down to balance and finding the boundaries and the fine line between a spectrum rather than functioning on one extreme of either axis. But I think that since Saturn entered Aquarius, which was in spring of 2020, literally when COVID started, the idea of Saturn transiting a sign, like I said, is that it toughens us up in that area. It teaches us a damn lesson, not because it's punishing us, but it's because it's giving us the gift of knowledge and of wisdom. Wisdom is only earned through experience, and oftentimes we have to fail or go through hard experiences to gain that wisdom. It's rarely ever wisdom that comes from like the easiest things in life, right? or the things that require the least amount of effort. So with Saturn in Aquarius, that was instantly a slap in the face, a reality check of having to learn really harsh lessons around what it means to be a sense of community, a collective group with differing opinions, what is the greater good for humanity and for people at large. It taught us a lot about trusting science. It taught us a lot about trusting doctors, or not trusting doctors, or not trusting science, or not trusting the more technological side of Aquarius, which would be the internet, media at large, technology, social media, all of the, micro lessons and large lessons within the greater scale that is Aquarius and everything that Aquarius rules, which is like science, medical, humanity, humanitarian efforts, what is good for the group. A lot to do with, I would say, the very weird dynamic that we've never experienced before of togetherness online but separation in real life. And with it now leaving its final degrees of Aquarius, we're going to see the culmination of those lessons kind of materialize in a big way once it hits that critical anaretic degree of 29. And because Pluto is going to be entering Aquarius at the same time, so there's a lot of Aquarian themes going on. But as it enters into Pisces, I think that one of maybe the more obvious things that I've observed is that with that COVID wave of Saturn and Aquarius came this wave of the self-love and the self-care social media infographic trope of that like wavy Canva font being like, relax, give yourself a break, don't go too hard on yourself. And I think that that was necessary for sure, because we were dealing with like a phenomenon of a epidemic, a medical crisis that, at least for my age group, hadn't ever experienced before. And with that fear came like a lot of, the need for likes through content that was very reassuring to people that needed to feel safe, that needed to feel secure within themselves. And I think that message kind of got lost in translation over time and started to enable very unhealthy patterns and habits under the impression of like, oh, you're just leaning into self-care, and disintegrated the meaning of that so much so to the point where like I think the average person struggles to even define what self-care really means, or self-love, or things like that. And the reason I'm like harping on this a little bit is because, like, for example, I noticed a lot of obviously excessive drinking, right? When we saw COVID start, like even I indulged in that, and I was never a casual drinker before that. I would drink like socially and at like birthdays and stuff, and trust me, I would get drunk, baby. But I was not a casual drinker. I never just like had a glass of wine with dinner or anything, given I was like 22 when COVID started. But was I even 22, or was I no, I had to have been, I don't know. No, I was 22. And I think like a lot of that social media wave of self-care, again, collective togetherness online, separation in real life, drinking over Zoom, community found through technology, self-care, don't be so hard on yourself. We're going through an insane time. Don't feel bad about missing your doctor's appointment, going to the gym, your routines that have set up a really foundational life for yourself, your money failing, you gaining a bunch of weight from stress eating, you emotionally lashing out because you don't have the right way to handle your emotions right now because you're dealing with something crazy. And all of those things I think were piled on for so long that now we have a bunch of people that revel or now are left with these habits of like excess, overindulgence, complete lack of boundaries, and no self-control. And that could absolutely do with drinking, overeating, stress eating, not doing the things that support your health and support a healthy lifestyle and life towards your goals. And again, it's still all under this like relatable, almost sort of joke that everybody is in on about not putting effort into your life any longer because life is really hard and we need a break all the time. And that's not for me to say like that's not true or like that's not justified or something like that, because it definitely is. But I think like it's weird, at least from my personal experience. I'm trying not to make it too personal because I want this to be more collective oriented, but like I was very hustle culture girl for years, like before COVID. And then I think when COVID started, I did kind of fall under that bracket of just have the drink, just have the cake, just call out for so long. And then, you know, you're thinking, oh, this is something that's working for me. This is something that's, I'm being nice to myself. This is self-care. This is self-love. Until 2 years go by, you gained 40 pounds. You have no emotional boundaries anymore. You do not know what it means anymore to muster up any effort. You constantly say you're going to do things and then you don't do them. And you excessively buy, eat, or indulge in things that you know are probably just engaging in because of the immediate gratification of like life is hard and I want to feel good right now, and losing track of those long-term goals. And I think that Saturn moving into Pisces is like a direct correlation to now having to address and confront all of those band-aids, all of those vices, all of those supplementary alternatives that we use to give ourselves the instant gratification rather than the discipline that comes with I won't engage in pleasure now because it's worth to have the pleasure in a greater way later. And I think that will probably manifest through the vessel of people having to finally look in the mirror and be like, oh my God, I have a problem. I am actually an alcoholic. I really have no emotional regulation. I clearly have a retail therapy problem. I constantly sleep with people that do not respect me. And you know, all of these things that, again, were under the guise of like, oh, just have fun, we're young, life is hard, feel good now, it's self-care. Getting the reality check of Saturn moving into Pisces pretty quickly in a more like social community way of probably having to confront just the ways that we make ourselves feel better in ways that aren't productive for the long run due to emotions. Pisces, current emotion equaling the truth, reality now, and that not changing until they feel differently. And the only time you will feel differently when it comes to having to sacrifice your instant gratification is when you see the consequences of it, like drinking every weekend. If that was something that I love doing and everyone was like, that's not good for you, you should probably stop, come on, like alcohol isn't good for you, you shouldn't be drinking that often. There's not really a reason for you to stop. Like the next weekend is gonna come, and yeah, like alcohol is bad for you, but if you've been having a good time every single weekend, there's no really incentive to stop, right? That reason to stop doesn't come until you realize you fucking yelled at your girlfriend when you were blackout drunk, or that you got a DUI, or that you hit your neighbor's car, and then all of a sudden you're like, maybe drinking every single weekend to blow some steam off isn't something that is good for me in the long run. And now I'm starting to see why. And I'm using drinking just because I do feel like it's a good example that like the everyday person has a lot of access to, and like, or at least know somebody that like, you know, has an issue with that. But also because Pisces literally rules like addictions and escapism through substances, and being in that alternative state of like non-reality, or like, you know, lucid reality, being under the influence of Pisces or Neptune. So I think Saturn entering here is going to have a lot of people having to sit down and face themselves in a way that they might have been running away from or trying to escape once consequences start occurring. Like I was saying before, with new moons and water signs, it's not that I'm saying like they can equally be as depressing or dark as a full moon, but I think it's always going to kind of kick up the emotional world or our subconscious sort of realm. And in doing that, a new moon here could be like the new beginning of a new chapter regarding those Piscean themes. So for me in particular, I'm a Scorpio rising, so Pisces rules my 5th house of things like excess, pleasure, joy, romance. Like literally my 5th house is escapism ruled by Pisces, or like creativity, dreaminess, spirituality, non-reality, whatever you want to call it. So for me, I think maybe that's why I'm like really having this sort of interpretation from it. But obviously, like wherever it's ruling in your house system, in your zodiacal wheel based off of your rising sign, it's going to be more personal to the themes of that house. So for example, like if you have Pisces ruling your 4th house, a lot of this might have to do with like deep emotional turmoil or trauma, or like crossing over, overlapping, lack of boundaries between you and your family, or you and like the generations that come before you, you and your inner world, like the deepest parts of yourself. If it's ruling your 9th house, this would be confronting maybe like where you've gone too far off of uncharted territory regarding your belief system or your faith, or challenging those beliefs that you have, or maybe bringing you back down to earth in a way that requires you to kind of return to the drawing board when it comes to the origin point of why you believe the things that you believe, where you've adopted them from, if they are authentic to you, and having those beliefs or your faith challenged. I think too that concept, again, I wanted to save this a little bit more for the Saturn and Pisces predictions video, but this makes me to kind of touch into like a whole nother chapter of what I think Saturn and Pisces will be, which is like really having to tackle the monster that is spirituality on social media, and the dismantling of what manifestation, law of attraction, and spirituality really is. Because I don't think people realize, unless you're like really tapped in and paying attention, I don't think people realize how badly the entire spiritual world realm has been weaponized against especially like young white girls, to think of it as something so detached from the actual origin of what the entire purpose of spirituality and faith is, to be in touch with yourself and have that inner knowing and like togetherness of you and the world around you basically. And have like instead been under the impression of like this really strong capitalistic connection between you and the things that you can buy or engage with outside of yourself that will hopefully get you what you want, from a place of like needing to be in control, which is the absolute opposite of like surrendering into faith, which is the whole point. Like we have dived so deeply and so delusionally into seeing like, you know, love spells on TikTok, or people saying that you can just law of attraction your child's cancer away, or that if you got abused by your boyfriend, it's because deep down you wanted it and you need to attract better. Like things like that, of course, come with a lot of nuance and like in some ways can be true, but at face value are so damaging and dangerous to share as like common rhetoric. And to see such a large majority of that sort of content not only being posted but being pushed incredibly by the algorithm is going to have to be confronted with Saturn and Pisces into people having to again come back to the drawing board and like redefine what faith and spirituality is, especially because like the American homes of like the nuclear family that does not exist anymore, my generation in particular, looked like being a kid, seeing the damage of the Great Recession, having your parents buy you a Wii to try to distract you from the fact that they were getting divorced, turning 12, getting bullied on the internet, using the internet as a supplementary like parent raising you and being raised by television and reality TV, and then going through high school with a broken education system that did not consider the fact that our brains would be altered and challenged by not only the stress around us, but the introduction to technology, loosening our ability to retain attention, and thus leading to many people failing, and then seeing the cracks in the entire structure of like the college education, leading to a lot of financial issues, and now seeing the economy in a position where like our parents at our age now at 25 already had like their first kid, their own house, and a great job and a perfect future with the white picket fence, and everyone my age is like, I wonder if I'll ever be able to move out. Also, I don't want to get married or have kids. And I think that like Saturn in Pisces is kind of going to be the connection of Pluto moving out of Capricorn, which started in 2008 with the recession, and now entering Aquarius. Like, the thing that I always tell people too is that Neptune, when it goes through a sign, it brings the glamour and the delusion to that area for like 15 years or something, right? 15 years. That's a window of time. It's not either or. But I don't know it off the top of my head. But Neptune going through a sign is essentially going to be like, this is the solution, this is the delusion, this is what we've been missing the whole time, this is where the magic is at. And it's not until Pluto enters that sign that Neptune then leaves and completely destroys and proves to us why we should have never idolized or romanticized that area to begin with. So for example, Neptune went through Aquarius, I believe, from probably right before 2000, like 1998 to like 2011, and that was obviously like the beginning of like the dot-com bubble, the internet, computers, Windows, Apple, things like that. So to have Neptune go through that Aquarius robotic technology community, connecting everybody across the world sign, it was like, oh my god, this is a miracle. Obviously, once we got past the like fear of people literally being like, technology is going to turn against us and kill us, which we're revisiting now, Neptune going through Aquarius was essentially like, technology is the answer to everything. How have we not known this? How have we missed this the entire time? And kind of put that veil over our minds to indulge. This is fun, this is escapism, this is enjoyment, this is pleasure, this is beauty, this is incredible. With Neptune going through Aquarius until 2011, like, that was literally the age of being raised by YouTube, watching TV all day, being raised by the TV instead of your own parents, getting every new gadget for Christmas as a kid, and having Pluto then enter into Aquarius now next month with Saturn in Pisces. We're addressing the Piscean energy of overindulgence, escapism, and distraction, and Pluto's going to destroy the veil, the illusion that Neptune through Aquarius made for those 10 years, 12 years, by dismantling all of the Aquarian themes of technology, the internet, futuristic stuff, the crossover of like technology with humanity, and how they're supplementary and alternative now for the next 15-20 years. So now we're facing not the consequences only. It's not to say that like we are only seeing the bad side. Pluto doesn't just bring bad energy, it like shows you the truth, and it can do that in a very dangerous way if it has to be pushed to that point. And Saturn very well will put you through very testing trials and tribulations in order to encourage that same outcome, and putting that through Pisces, I think at the same time, that combination's like lethal. Like I really feel like people, it's like you either have to face reality or you will actually legitimately die. You have to accept your truth of what like your actual physical realistic circumstances, and like put an effort into remediating them, both mind, body, and spirit approach. Otherwise, like, good luck. And I feel like that's the big lesson here, at least from what I'm drawing from it right now. There's so much I could say. Trust me, I could talk about this for like 10 more hours, but we're talking about the new moon here, so I need to shut my mouth. But what I'm saying is this is the last new moon we'll have in Pisces before Saturn enters it. So it's kind of like the last the last we can really dip our toes in the water that is Pisces without having a lifeguard being like, don't do that right behind us the entire time. That's not necessarily my invitation to say go completely haywire and like go off the rails as one last binge before you have to have some structure, but rather that like, yes, it's a new moon and opening a new chapter here, but with the conjunction to Saturn, it's kind of like the ominous, like, enjoy it, but I'm watching sort of vibe, you know? And I prefer that, I think, sometimes, rather than just sheer water energy with like nothing to grasp onto, no life raft or anything like that. But I do think that I'm someone who is very like painfully self-aware and tries very hard to implicate structure and discipline into my life, and I don't really have anything that I excessively use as a form of escapism in my life because I'm actually quite afraid of that, and it makes me feel like I don't have control when I have something that I lean on as a vice. But I know that the average person, and I'm not judging that, if anything I empathize with it and kind of like wish I had my thing, the average person does have something that they are excessive with, overindulgent, or use as a vice. And I do think that it's going to need to be time within the next few weeks to like look in the mirror and accept that. Otherwise there's going to be like a rocky road that kind of forces you to learn that lesson the hard way for the next 2.5 year cycle, similarly to the way that Aquarius placements had to learn that through 2020 until now. So let's get into this new moon and how it's going to affect you by your rising sign. Where is the chart? I thought I had it pulled up. Okay, it's going to be at 1 degree of Pisces, and it's going to be in conjunction to Saturn, which is going to be at 28 degrees in Aquarius, and Pluto's at 29 degrees of Capricorn. There's no major aspects really at all besides the moon being conjunct Saturn, and then I guess we could also say that there is a loose like growing sextile between the moon, like as it transits throughout that day, to the north node, and then it's going to be in a square to the south, or I'm sorry, in a trine to the south node. So whenever the nodes are involved in general, there's going to be a layer of like, you know, fatedness. Like I was saying before with the south node moving into Scorpio, I think that we kind of got a more mild introduction to this letting go, or like I'm literally picturing like watching emotions, like painful, heavy, deep rooted, like sludgy leftover emotions sliding off of the back of somebody. And I feel like that hole began digging itself when the south node moved into Scorpio again at the beginning January Jesus of 2022. And with this new moon conjunct Saturn, by the time that the moon is in Pisces this time next month, Saturn will be in Pisces and Pluto will be about to make its ingress just days away into Aquarius. Times are changing, whether we like it or not, and it's going to be a lot. March, we got to hold on. Seriously, March is going to be a toughie, I think. And that's not to say that it's going to be bad. It's an adjustment. It's just a very big uprooting change. We've been teetering on the edge of it all for quite some time now, I would say since the beginning of last year. And we kind of had this weird, almost like do-over astrologically stepping back into 2023 because of the retrogrades of everything. So think of where you were this time last year. I said this on Patreon too. Like, I guarantee to a certain degree there was an opportunity to literally repeat the exact sequence of events that started unraveling at the beginning of January for you last year, this year. Like, I guarantee there was like, do you want to do this again, or do you want to do it differently? And I would hope that you guys did it differently, because that was the whole lesson. But now with these planets retracing their retrograde steps and now actually leaving their signs, it's a big change. It's a big change. We're going to have to let go of a lot and be ready to make room for a lot. I'm very excited. I'm quite nervous based off of what in my chart is being activated. Um, I don't know who I'm going to be or where I'm going to be a month, 3 months, 6 months, a year from now, because everything's hitting on like my angular houses, on my IC, on my ascendant, on my MC, on my DC. And I'm just like, what's about to happen? But I'm excited for us all. Let's get into each of the signs and how this new moon is going to affect you based off of your rising sign. I don't really have much to say, honestly, for this one. I'm not sure. I just don't have to, I don't feel like I have to elaborate much. Maybe it's because of the lack of really strong aspects, but I think it's kind of like this final kiss goodbye to the Aquarius area of our chart. Both with Pluto introducing itself and Saturn kind of exiting, and we can maybe expect a little bit of a dramatic exit with Saturn leaving Pisces, maybe more so collectively, but I do think that Saturn sort of sprinkles its fairy dust on its way out sometimes of signs and kind of rewards us a little bit for being down for the challenge and surviving it. Again, Saturn is not here to punish us. It's actually very much here to watch us grow through tough love. So most of the time when you complete the lesson, you get the, sticker on your A+ sheet of paper for passing the test. So you can maybe expect, if you've been especially diligently trying to succeed in the Aquarius area of your chart, a little bit of a parting gift or success or opportunity. But with that comes the very transformative, profound entrance of Pluto. And those two things I don't think are coincidence for going hand in hand together. I want to be very clear, by the way, and emphasize the fact that I was definitely like putting a little bit of a wet blanket on the sense of talking about Saturn moving into Pisces and maybe killing the high of what could actually potentially be like a really great new moon before things maybe get a little bit tougher, more challenging. So just know that this time actually is like a really great new moon in terms of manifesting and like having things that you want actually coming into fruition. And I think that the conjunction to Saturn is actually far more helpful than people are making it. Saturn's participation in an aspect does not have to mean that it's like boring or it's making it a little less good than it could be, or it's like harshing the high of what could be like really fun and creative and intuitive and all of those great things. I actually think it's very supportive because again, it's grounding the dreams of Pisces. Think of like the artist and the muse. It's like you get to be the muse, you get to just say the desire, you get to say what you want to experience, and Saturn is like, okay, beautiful, thank you for telling me that, this is how we're gonna do it. It kind of is the game plan or is the blueprint or is the to-do list of what you need to do in order to make those things happen. So whereas other sort of like Pisces transits, when people are like, oh, this is a great time to manifest, a lot of it is like internal and in the heart and in the mind, and maybe not as susceptible to seeing it play out into reality, into the physical world. This is a great time to dream it up and then put it on paper and actually see it come to life, because Saturn wants to see those things come to life. And Saturn and Pisces, Saturn transits in general, are not bad. So that's why I want to make a totally different video in terms of the predictions, because it doesn't only have to be, oh, we're facing our vices and our delusions. It's also like we're getting better at delusion. We're getting better at manifesting. We're getting better at spirituality. And it's just the need to find balance between both ends of the spectrum. And that's always what it is finding the balance. So use this new moon to absolutely dream up and like wish whatever you want, because there is a lot more of that grounded energy in order to kind of bring it to life in a realistic way with a realistic approach. Write things down. I always suggest that to you guys. Keep your heart and your mind open and use that Piscean new moon energy to lean into the emotion. If it feels good when you think about it, bring it to life. If it feels like, I feel like I should be doing this right now, so I'm just going to cross my fingers and hope it happens, and then you don't do any of the action that you need in order to support it, then yeah, don't be surprised that the things that you want aren't coming for you or to you. So I would just really take even like 10 minutes to get off of your phone and imagine what you really want. Wish it, think it, feel it, and then be willing to, get to work, keep your opportunities open, and when that chance comes to you in real life in the form of a question or a person or an opportunity, be ready to say yes to it. So let's get into each of the rising signs and how this new moon will affect you. Let's just start in order of the zodiacal wheel. Let's start with Aries. Aries risings, this new moon is happening in your 12th house of your psyche, your dreams, your intuition, healing, sleep, isolation, letting go, endings, and it's going to be in conjunction to Saturn, which is in its final degrees of your 11th house of friendships, community, your sense of belonging, your big dreams, your hopes, your place of authority or leadership to a group of people, or sense of belonging within a larger community. And I would say that having a new moon here in your 12th house is really going to open the door to maybe getting more in touch with your psyche on a deeper level. This could be anything, like maybe starting talk therapy or any really form of therapy, getting more in touch with something like meditation, or even just taking time to be recharging by yourself rather than being overwhelmed by like these social dynamics of like needing to hang out with friends or be surrounded by, you know, people in your network a lot or something like that. I think ironically this is a new chapter to an ending, or like the beginning of the end of something that maybe you need to let go of, that you are holding on to, regarding like your mental health, old memories, past traumas, things that were unhealed or kind of unresolved deep within your psyche. And I would say the conjunction to Saturn might be even the grounding of a friend helping you out or something, or maybe having that new beginning through the vessel of the support of a larger community or something. So for example, this could look like you beginning to maybe get into meditation more. In the 11th house could be, with the Saturn conjunction, like the help of an app that you start having a disciplined routine with, where you go on the app every day to do the meditation and have that structure, or to where you start, you know, making sure that you go to therapy every single day, or not every single day, I mean you can if you want, every single week, with the help of somebody who has like a little bit more of an authority regarding like what you need to work on. And that Saturn energy could be a mentor or a therapist or somebody that can kind of give you that structure. I think it's a very good chapter that could be opening for you, that's going to give you a deeper look onto what's going on inside, and even how your physical health and your daily routine and stuff like that plays into the results of like what your everyday life looks like on the inside in your mind, and vice versa, like how your thoughts affect your reality and how your reality affects your thoughts. Taurus risings, this is going to be happening in your 11th house, and it's going to be in conjunction to Saturn, which is just leaving your 10th house of your career. So having a new beginning in the 11th house, a new moon here in Pisces, is going to be really exciting in terms of maybe connecting with a new group of friends, of a new network that you get in touch with, even like opening the door to starting to embark on the larger dream or manifestation that you have. This area of the chart is really about how other people can support you and lean into you, whether that's financially investing in you, rooting you on as a follower or a subscriber, or just you getting closer to materializing your very big goals. And to have that conjunction to Saturn leaving your 10th house tells me that there's probably this big culminating moment of your career, and like wrapping up a major project here, leaving a career or a job or a position in order to embark on those dreams, maybe meeting a mentor or somebody who has already accomplished the things that you want, and them kind of serving as a vessel of support in order for you to lean into this area of your chart. I think a new moon here is really exciting. It gives you an opportunity to maybe like go viral, make a new friend, find a new place of belonging. It could even start with something as simple as like joining a Facebook group of people who are maybe like more well versed or more experienced in the things that you really want in life, and following in their footsteps in order to maybe have like a clearer blueprint of how to get what you want on a large level. Gemini risings, this new moon is happening in your 10th house of career and reputation, public image, success, and accomplishments, and it's going to be in conjunction to Saturn, which is leaving your 9th house. So this is really exciting. I love a good new moon in the 10th house because this is really going to illuminate you being able to either start or finish something that will be extremely rewarding, not only to you, like in terms of being able to put something like on your resume or say that you've gotten a certain reward or award or a certain like accomplishment or something, but the fact that it'll be illuminated to the world around you, because this is the height of your chart. It's the public eye and the way that you're recognized by the world around you. So to have a new moon here is really exciting. It could look like starting a new career. It could look like being recognized in your industry. It could look like kind of getting like a glow up professionally, or at least in terms of the way that you're perceived, and having the help of Saturn. That sort of authority and responsibility coming from your ninth house might be the help of what is gained wisdom that you've gotten through your experiences the last 2.5 years that have led up to this point. Like maybe you were struggling with a certain area of education, expertise, experience, something like that, that maybe affected your career, and to have the new moon in conjunction to that looks like you being able to start off on the right foot based off of the challenges that you've overcome since then. Cancer risings, this new moon is going to be happening in your ninth house of faith, spirituality, education, traveling, your belief system, your overall perspective of the world, and it's going to be in conjunction to Saturn, which will now be leaving your eighth house of shared investments, boundaries, love, sex, death, taxes, transformation. I feel like in your case it's probably more transformation oriented. Of course, we know the eighth house has a lot to do with things like legal fees and money and exchanges and finances and banking and stuff like that. However, with a new moon in your ninth house usually being something that's more spiritually inclined, I would say that this looks like having a revelation or a spiritual awakening, or even just a passion to start to understand something on a more esoteric level, with the conjunction of Saturn from your eighth house being that you've completed a 2.5 year cycle in terms of shedding what no longer belonged to you, both like energetically, emotionally, intuitively, all of that. And having that sort of authority, that little medal that you've gained from all that change, assert you and support you in embarking on this new journey that's going to be your ninth house. If this is more literal, I would say that this could look like maybe going back to school or starting something that's education oriented, and maybe having to include like the association of loans or somebody investing in you, or like having to do it through an institution or something like that. But overall, I would say that a new beginning in your ninth house usually looks like a travel opportunity, an education opportunity, or a new beginning in terms of learning through experience and gaining wisdom. And I think through being tossed through the mud of the eighth house the last 2.5 years with Saturn, you kind of earned your stripes and are now prepared for this in a way that you might have not been earlier. Leo risings, this new moon is happening in your eighth house of sex, death, taxes, shared investments, transformation, and rebirth. And it's going to be conjunct Saturn in your seventh house of relationships, commitments, business partnerships, and agreements with other people. So Saturn transiting your seventh house for the last 2.5 years has really forced you to buckle down and grow up and mature through challenges that were happening in your interpersonal relationships. And having a new moon in the eighth house is usually going to be the beginning of the end in a very intimate way, in the sense that it's a new beginning to letting go. It is a new chapter to merging with somebody or something else, and it's kind of an invitation to lean into self-transformation by surrendering to what you allow to control you and no longer allowing that to happen. So with the relevance of your relationship house and that sector being lit up for you, this could look like anything from having faced a lot of hurdles in your recent relationship in the last 2 years, and now having the new moon in the eighth house be like stepping into marriage or engagement, merging resources. It could also look like having a business partnership that's now graduated towards having like an investor, or it could just be that maybe you even left a relationship or cut off people around you, or are kind of like standing on your own now. Going into the eighth house is like, okay, we trim off all the fat of all the people that weren't supposed to be around you, or the lessons that you need to learn through them. Now you need to go on a journey of learning lessons from yourself by looking within into the areas of things like shame and humiliation and things that we're not so proud of or that we try to hide about ourselves. And by illuminating that, a new moon here is kind of like the chance to dive a little bit deeper, clear what no longer needs to be here in order to make room for the new. Virgo risings, this new moon is going to be happening in your 7th house of relationships, commitments, business partnerships, agreements, contracts, both romantic and platonic and professional. And it's going to be in conjunction to Saturn, which is now beginning to leave your 6th house of work, health, routine, everyday, life, schedule, pets, the foods you eat, things like that. So to have a new moon in your 7th house of relationships, of course, gives us the opportunity to maybe meet somebody new romantically. However, I would say that the 5th house is usually romance and like first dates and getting to know somebody, while the 7th house is usually like you've already kind of known this person for a little bit and now we're deciding to commit to one another. So this is a little bit of a more serious area in terms of agreements on being on the same page as other people, again, whether that's romantic or not. And a new moon here can kind of look like an invitation to go in on something with somebody. So if you have been dating somebody, this could look like the chance to have maybe the exclusive conversation of like, how can we bump this up a notch? How can we make this more serious? It could look like a contract maybe being given to you from a business partnership or an investor or somebody wanting to work with you. It could also just look like maybe even something where there's a new beginning to the way that you handle like your open enemies, people that you don't get along with, just your interpersonal relationships in general, and deciding to handle things in a new way here. With the conjunction to Saturn in your 6th house, it's interesting because we're combining now the people that are very close to you to the variables of your everyday physical world that are very close to you. So there's kind of an overlap here of how your work, your routine, or your health affect, whether it's for better or for worse, your close relationships. And I think with Saturn transiting your 6th house for the last 2.5 years, you've kind of earned your stripes in terms of like getting chiseled when it comes to work, productivity, organization, and really getting like a handle on what the everyday routine of your life has to look like in order for you to have the lifestyle or the end result that you want, what foundation routine you need to have in order to support the sort of relationships you want in your life. So from doing all of that work on like kind of, I feel like chiseling is the right word to use, chiseling your everyday routine and how you take care of yourself and how the smaller details of your everyday life amount to a larger, bigger picture, you now get to introduce who's getting to like participate in this with me, who do I want to come with me into this next chapter, how do the people around me closest to me affect my ability to either successfully or non-successfully continue these 6 house traits. And by having Saturn about to enter into your 7th house, you've mastered the 6 house themes, and now it's going to double down on, okay, I have to now face those same challenges and hurdles and obstacles through who I keep closest to me and how that's a reflection of the way that I take care of myself every day. Libra risings, this new moon is happening in your 6th house of work, health, everyday routine, organization, productivity, and it will be conjunct Saturn in your 5th house. It's leaving your 5th house of love, sex, romance, indulgence, celebration, all the things that feel really good in life. So to have a new moon in your 6th house can typically look like somebody starting a new routine, whether it's like, I'm deciding to start going to the gym now, I'm going to be more productive, I'm going to start being a girly that gets up at 5 a.m. every single morning. It's one of those more mundane, brushed off new beginnings that maybe don't seem like a big deal, but can actually like totally alter your life once you create a habit here. And to have the conjunction to Saturn leaving your 5th house, the last 2.5 years, you've really been tested in terms of having to almost gain discipline and maturity around the way that you enjoy things. And I know that that sounds weird, but Saturn moving through the 5th house is usually going to kind of file down and eliminate the things that maybe you did for joy or pleasure or escapism that were and weren't helpful to like your be all end all character here on this earth. Like it kind of decided what gets to stay and what gets to go in terms of like the way that you have fun, the things that you do for your own pleasure, not anybody else's, the things that bring you joy, your creativity, your sex life, and kind of creating boundaries and discipline here. So to have that Saturn conjunction to this new moon looks like you now introducing those same themes that you've mastered in the 5th house area of your chart, and now bringing that discipline with you into your work, your routine, your organization, your productivity, and how you approach your everyday life and how those smaller details create really the outcome for the bigger picture of what you want your life to look like. So I would say that this is actually a cool combination of overlapping work and play in a way where finding that balance will ultimately allow you to kind of choose what you want your lifestyle to look like, but you want to keep the good boundaries and the good rules that you've made for yourself and the good lessons that you learned from the fifth house, and implicate that now into the way that you approach the more boring things, but that are very important to our life. Scorpio risings, this new moon is happening in your fifth house of love, sex, romance, creativity, joy, pleasure, all of the better things in life, and it'll be conjunct your transiting Saturn that has been in your fourth house of home and family for the last 2.5 years. So having Saturn transit through your fourth house is not an easy transit because it's going through an angular house, arguably like the most intimate one, and having Saturn kind of sweep up the entire foundation or the anchor of who you are in your private life and in your deepest, like most intimate self, it really sort of files down you having to take a harsh reality check of facing yourself in the mirror and figuring out why you are the way you are, where that has come from, what the origin was, and now deciding who you want to be moving forward and having to rebuild that foundation on your own, whether people are helping you or not, whether family is helping you or not, whether you feel comfortable and at home with yourself or not. And to have a new moon in your fifth house is very exciting because it's kind of like the more carefree, like free pass, indulgent new moon, in the sense that this is like meeting a new romantic partner, hooking up with somebody new. This is starting a new creative project, or being like, I'm just going to buy a paint set for fun because I just want to enjoy myself when I'm not working. This is like, I'm going to start going out to this restaurant more often, that way I can give myself some more breaks. And to have that in conjunction to the more authoritative, responsible planet that is Saturn, leaving such an intimate area of your chart, I feel like it's kind of giving you the reward of like you've survived the very not fun transit of Saturn, kind of forcing you through the muddiest of the area of your chart and really testing you and filing you down to like just stone and no enjoyment or pleasure. And this new moon in your fifth house, I feel like is kind of like, okay, roam free, like enjoy. It's like it being let out to recess when you've been like in school all day and you just don't want to do the work anymore. So I think this is a really good time for Scorpio risings to kind of give themselves a break after a really tough transit. However, the lessons that you've learned from the fourth house are going to be the thing that supports your ability to have more fun in a disciplined way as Saturn moves into your fifth house. So you want to, keep all of the things that you've learned about yourself and where you maybe have some of your deeper unhealed wounds that you need to work on and why you are the way you are, and take that with you as you have this new approach to love, sex, romance, and the things that make you happy. You want to have a very strong understanding of why those things make you happy. That way you can use it productively and not in a way that'll damage you. And use that to your advantage. That way, when you are leaning into indulgence, you know that it's really giving you that chance to roam free and enjoy yourself and not just a form of escapism. Sagittarius risings, this new moon is happening in your fourth house of home, family, property, private life, your foundation, who you are at the core, and it's going to be conjunct Saturn, which is leaving your third house and now will be entering your fourth house next month. And the third house is really about like everyday communication, speaking, talking, writing, your thought processes, your everyday life, kind of like the things that are most familiar to your immediate environment. So people, places, environments, things, and circumstances that you deal with on a daily basis, pretty much on it with an emphasis of communication. And to have Saturn entering soon your fourth house of home and family, you're gonna kind of like undergo a deeper process that's going to uproot everything that you've ever known about yourself and where you come from and who you are, and facing those trials and tribulations through things that might overlap with family living situations, in your private life in general. So having a new moon here, I feel like, is the preparation period of like starting a new chapter regarding your living situation in your home and family. That's going to initially be like the preview of what's to come and maybe become a little bit more challenging, but only in attempts to have you mature and gain more wisdom once Saturn enters your fourth house. Typically, new moons in the fourth house don't always have to necessarily mean like, oh, you're getting a new house or you're getting a new family member, but rather that like this could look like going out to dinner with one of your parents and connecting with them in a new way. It could look like you deciding to have a night in and maybe renovating, or even just like moving your room around into a way that brings a little bit of a new chapter. It's more of an energetic thing, I think, more practically, because not every time you have a new moon in your fourth house are you going to be able to move. But I do think that this is kind of like telling you or inviting you to clear your space in an exciting way to make room for what Saturn might bring in terms of new challenges and circumstances that are going to ask you to sort of grow up and gain more responsibility in this area. So if it is something like signing a lease, getting an apartment, something like that, this is the new beginning. And when Saturn enters, it'll teach you how to deal with this in a practical, realistic, mature, responsible way. Capricorn risings, this new moon is happening in your third house of speaking, talking, writing, everyday routine, everyday communication, as well as things like siblings, cars, transportation, really everything that's familiar to you in your everyday life. So the people closest to you, the things closest to you, the world that seems most familiar to you. And it's going to be conjunct Saturn, which is leaving your second house. It's been going through your second house since early 2020, which was really putting an emphasis on growing and gaining responsibility and maturity through your self-worth, your finances, your possessions, and things of value. So having a new moon in your third house, I think, can sometimes even just look like something like literally getting a part fixed in your car that you've been putting off for a while. It could look like taking a short trip or taking a different route to work. It could look like calling up a friend and deciding like, I'm going to do this more often, I'm going to communicate with them more, or even like starting a new book. I think the third house often gets like a bad reputation for being boring or like not that important, but it has a lot to do with our thought processes and the way that we communicate. So having a new moon here could look like the conception of like an important or eye-opening conversation. And I think with the conjunction to Saturn in your second house, you're able to approach conversations now with this newfound sort of like swag and responsibility around the way that you respect yourself and what your values are. There is such a loud plane crossing. I'm so sorry if you can hear it. But like I was saying, I feel like having a new moon in the third house kind of almost like invites you to a table to have an open conversation, and to have that conjunction to you now having earned your stripes in terms of like really having to buckle down on what your values are, what your boundaries are, and how you respect yourself. It's a conversation or an opportunity that maybe you wouldn't have been able to handle in such a mature or self-respecting way a few years ago. But now that you've had that Saturn transit, it's kind of like the cherry on top in a way where it might feel faded, to where it's like, wow, thank God this is happening now, because if this happened earlier I would not have handled it as well. So this could really be like even confronting something with a sibling, knowing how to negotiate better when you're like buying a new car. It's that sort of like mental agility where you've gained some maturity or like experience under your belt in that second house area of your chart, even with money or like having your own possessions, your own house, things like that, and being able to now use that to your advantage when it comes to your everyday environment, the way that you communicate with the people closest to you, and how your thoughts affect the way that they play out into your physical world. Aquarius rising, this new moon is happening in your second house of finances, self-worth, possessions, personal values, really anything that has to do with value, both emotionally and financially, and security as well. And it's going to be in conjunction to Saturn in your first house, leaving your first house of self-identity, who you are and what you look like. So you have really been through the ringer the last 2.5 years with that Saturn transit through your first house. Not only is that a hard transit to deal with, point blank period, because you're putting a malefic, arguably one of the hardest planets, through your first house of identity and self, but you had the fluke of nature experience of also having to go through that while you're dealing with the wrath that was COVID, and how it affected people not only physically and medically, but like the world at large, really going through a very tough period of struggle. So to have a new moon in your second house, I feel like literally is the reward of like, you have been through enough, we're giving you money, or we're giving you that house that you wanted, or we're giving you that really expensive luxury bag to treat yourself. Like a new moon in the second house is usually going to show us a new opportunity or new sense of ownership in regards to something that belongs to you personally, maybe making an investment into something, or kind of acknowledging a new chapter regarding the way that you respect yourself and your personal values. So either or, I feel like, would absolutely make sense with the conjunction to Saturn, because it's like you have such a better idea of who you are as a person now, and that sort of authority that you have on yourself, and that sense of like personal agency is going to be the thing to support your ability to now own something with confidence, now claim something, you know, in your name with confidence, now be able to determine what is and isn't your boundaries now with that sense of confidence. It's really combining this stronger sense of self with this newfound ability to respect your own values, boundaries, and desires, and be able to like stand on your own 2 feet and fight for them and defend them without requiring anyone else to agree on that or co-sign on if they think that's good for you or not. Pisces risings, this new moon is happening in your first house of self-identity, who you are, what you look like. Having a new moon in your first house is always going to be a little bit of a glow up era. I love this for you. A new moon in the first house could literally just look like dyeing your hair, getting a new style, getting a new outfit, maybe doing something different with your makeup, anything aesthetic, because the first house in your ascendant is typically going to point to like your physical looks. So having a new moon here can kind of be the beginning, a chapter of changing something aesthetically about yourself. But with the conjunction to Saturn leaving your 12th house, the last 2.5 years you've really been tested and kind of like dragged through the mud in terms of your psyche, your intuition, your mental health, your fears, your fear of being alone, your deepest traumas, the things that you need to heal through, letting go, endings, things like that. So to have a new moon in your first house, I feel like is more so about like your actual internal identity right now than it is your looks, because with that conjunction to Saturn, you're kind of using the maturity and authority that you've learned about yourself through the era of you having to like literally travel and learn through your subconscious mind the last few years, and now with that newfound knowledge and wisdom and maturity, you're able to support this new identity that you have for yourself. So I would even say with Saturn literally about to enter into your first house, you're going to, for the next 2.5 years, kind of have your identity or your sense of self challenged through Saturn's, you know, trials and tribulations. And that's not to say that like this means you're going to be ugly the next 2.5 years, or this means you're not going to like yourself the next 2.5 years, but it's rather like a growing pain that is going to work in your best interest to kind of make you tougher. It's going to kind of harden you up in a way that's going to be productive rather than problematic. So you went through all of the mental stuff, you went through all of the like psychological challenges and all of the challenges of like needing to really have a lot of confidence in your ability to connect with your mind in a very deep way. And now that you've succeeded in that area, having a new moon in your first house is like starting that new chapter, turning the page, and kind of like feeling, oh my god, I'm changing soon, like oh my god, I'm stepping into a new chapter, I can feel myself becoming a new person. And Saturn's really going to put the nail in the coffin in terms of you finally really getting to level up in a very big way.